She called out, "Miles!" No answer, not even an echo. Somewhere downstairs, behind the thick, soundproof doors of the whiskey lounge, laughter rose and fell. Male voices, the clink of crystal tumblers, the bass of jazz. Miles was entertaining clients. Again, Lucille's legs buckled. She dropped to her knees, the marble floor cold against her skin. Her fingers trembled as she reached for her phone on the hallway table. One call, just one. He'd told her not to be dramatic when she said the pain felt different tonight. "Hello, my beautiful family, and welcome once again to Love and Twilight with Dr. Phillips. Before we dive into today's powerful story, I want to feel your presence here. Type in the comments, 'I am ready, Dr. Phillips,' so I know you're walking this journey with me. Don't just listen quietly. Your engagement gives life to this community. Hit the like button if you believe in the power of love and healing, and subscribe so you never miss a single chapter. Every like, comment, and share helps us reach someone out there who truly needs this light. Let's begin." He didn't even look up from his decanter. She tried him first. Miles Drexler. No answer. Then the doctor. Voicemail. Her best friend. Nothing. The housekeeper. No response. Lucille let out a strangled sob. Her body was betraying her, folding under the weight of life and abandonment. She was 38 weeks pregnant, bleeding, and utterly alone in a house that looked beautiful in magazines but felt more like a tomb. Another contraction slammed into her. She screamed into the hallway, raw and panicked. The phone slipped from her grasp, skidding across the polished floor. She crawled after it, her limbs shaking, her world tilting. One hand braced her belly, the other fumbled to unlock the screen. Her vision blurred, thumbs stabbing at her contacts. She thought she clicked her OBGYN. But her pain made decisions for her. She hit send on a message before collapsing again onto her side. Her chest heaved. Her mind spiraled. Her body was breaking. The message was short, fractured, wild with fear. "Help, in labor, alone, 1715 Wexley Avenue. Please. I'm scared." She didn't know she had sent it to Robert Morgan. She didn't know she had just summoned the only man who ever truly saw her. Miles refilled another glass of whiskey downstairs, roaring with laughter at a colleague's joke. Business was booming. Investors were circling. He toasted to legacy, success, and the future. Upstairs, his wife was bleeding on the floor. Across the city, Robert Morgan sat in his penthouse office, closing his laptop after reviewing the final acquisition documents. His tie was loosened. The city lights stretched beyond the windows. Then his phone buzzed. He glanced at it lazily. A message, unknown number. He read it once, then again. "Help, in labor, alone, 1715 Wexley Avenue. Please, I'm scared." He froze. That address, that name on the message preview. Lucille. His chair screeched back as he stood. 2 years. 2 damn years without a word, without closure. She had vanished like smoke, straight into the arms of Miles Drexler, the same Miles who had stolen internships, deals, friends, and now, her. Robert's breath caught. The city spun around him. She was in labor? Why would she call him? Had she meant to? It didn't matter. He was already moving. Jacket on, keys in hand. His SUV peeled out of the underground parking, tires shrieking against the concrete. He didn't stop to question it. Didn't wonder if it was a mistake. Didn't care. Lucille was in pain. And Robert Morgan didn't leave the women he loved to bleed alone. At Wexley Avenue, rain began to drizzle, dotting the stone walkway. Lucille barely registered the doorbell. Then came the knock. Urgent. Strong. "Lucille, it's Robert. I got your message." Her heartbeat stuttered. "Robert? Had she?" The door burst open. A blur of dark wool, strong arms and stormy eyes entered the room. He found her curled up, legs drawn, face contorted in pain. "Lucille," he breathed. Her lips cracked open. "You, Robert?" He dropped to his knees beside her. "Yes, baby, it's me." She broke. Tears poured down her cheeks as she reached for him like he was gravity. He didn't hesitate. He wrapped her up in his arms and lifted her off the cold floor, pressing her against his chest like something priceless. Her head collapsed against him. Her fists clenched his coat. "You're safe now," he whispered. He didn't ask why. Didn't ask what. He carried her to the car like she was always meant to be in his arms. As the SUV roared toward the hospital, Lucille clutched his hand with one and gripped her belly with the other. Robert's voice cut through the sound of her moans. "Where's Miles?" Lucille turned her head away. "Hosting a whiskey night. I called. He said I was being dramatic." Robert's jaw flexed. He didn't speak again for a minute, but when he did, his voice was low and lethal. "You deserved better than that bastard from the beginning." Lucille said nothing, but in her heart, a dangerous question stirred. What if this baby wasn't Miles? The city lights blurred as Robert pushed the accelerator harder, weaving through lanes like a man chasing fate. He had no explanation, no plan, no logic, just a name that refused to fade from his chest even after all this time. Lucille, the woman who had haunted his nights with nothing more than a memory, a stolen gallery kiss, a broken promise, and now a message. Help. In labor. Alone. Every word rattled inside his skull. He gripped the steering wheel tighter as questions stormed his mind. Had she meant to call him? Why was she alone? And the one he didn't want to ask, was it his child? 2 years ago. He remembered it all. She had walked into the charity art gala in that red dress, elegance and fire stitched into one body. She was Miles' date that night, but Robert had caught her gaze from across the room, and the electricity between them had drowned out every toast and every clink of glass. That night, she wasn't Miles's anything. That night, she came to Robert. They didn't speak about it afterward. They didn't get the chance. By morning, she was gone. And 6 months later, she was married to the same man who had been trying to best Robert since their college days. Robert never reached out again. Until now. The hospital came into view. He pulled up at the emergency bay and jumped out before the engine fully stopped. He scooped Lucille into his arms, shouting for help. Nurses rushed forward, grabbing a gurney, adjusting monitors. The hospital spun into organized chaos. Robert never let go of her hand. Lucille moaned in agony as they wheeled her down the hallway. "Stay," she pleaded. "I'm not leaving," he promised. Her grip tightened. Inside the labor ward, the air was thick with urgency. 8 centimeters, a nurse said. "No time for pain meds. We need to prep now." A young resident stepped in. "Let's get an emergency ultrasound. We need to monitor fetal distress levels." Lucille whimpered, drenched in sweat. Robert leaned over her. "You're doing amazing." "I can't," she panted. "Yes, you can," he said softly. "You already are." The technician rolled the machine next to her bed and began scanning. The screen flickered. Shapes moved. Shadows danced. Then the doctor frowned. He leaned closer, adjusted the wand. His brow furrowed. "Wait." He paused the machine and excused himself from the room without further explanation. Lucille looked up at Robert in confusion. "What's wrong?" she asked. He shook his head, unsure. "I don't know." Outside, the doctor was already dialing a number. He returned quickly, his eyes flicking toward Robert. "Mr. Morgan?" Robert stood. "Yes? May I speak with you for a moment, privately?" Lucille gripped the bedsheets. Her heart thundered in her ears. Robert followed the doctor out. Seconds passed, then minutes. Inside the room, Lucille's breath grew shallow. Her eyes stayed glued to the ceiling tiles, praying her baby was okay. That Robert wouldn't return with worse news. That she wasn't going to be left broken, again. When he stepped back in, he wasn't the same. His face was blank, unreadable, but his eyes burned. Lucille struggled to sit up. What did he say?" Robert walked slowly to the bed and sat down beside her. He took her hand in his, gently this time. "Lucille." The doctor ran a rapid gene test using the blood markers from the fetal scan. Because you didn't list Miles as the father, they checked for the next listed emergency contact. Her pulse stopped. Robert swallowed hard. "The baby's blood type. It doesn't match Miles. It matches mine." Lucille's lungs emptied. "No. That's not possible." "It is." She turned away, her hand flying to her mouth. Her whole body convulsed, not from pain, but from guilt, disbelief, shame. "I didn't know," she whispered. "Robert, I swear to you, I didn't know." "I believe you. I thought it was Miles. I thought it had to be. I didn't." Her voice cracked. Robert leaned forward, cupping her belly with both hands. His thumbs trembled. "You didn't have to know," he said softly. "Life knew." Life planned it for us. Tears spilled down her face. She had buried this truth beneath months of silence, fear, and denial. Now it stared back at her in the form of a man who still saw her, still loved her. A nurse knocked and peeked in. "We need to prep her now. The baby's heart rate is stable, but labor's moving fast." Robert stood and nodded. Lucille reached for him again, and without hesitation, he stayed by her side. They wheeled her into the delivery room. Bright lights, gloved hands, the smell of antiseptic. Lucille gasped as another contraction tore through her. Robert held her hand, forehead against hers. "Breathe. You're not alone." "I'm scared," she said. "I know, but I'm right here." He looked around at the monitors, the tubes, the people, and still, he only saw her, the woman who had unknowingly carried his child, the woman who once disappeared without a goodbye, the woman now breathing through the pain while still trying to protect everyone else. The nurse called out, "She's crowning." Robert locked eyes with Lucille. "You've got this." Her scream filled the room. Her back arched. One final push, then a cry. Sharp, strong, new. Lucille collapsed against the mattress, tears streaming down her cheeks. The doctor announced, "It's a girl." The nurse placed the tiny, wriggling bundle onto Lucille's chest. Lucille looked down. The baby blinked. Stormy gray eyes, just like his. Lucille choked out one word, "Emily." Robert kissed her forehead. "She's perfect. Just like her mother." Rain was falling when Robert's SUV screeched to a halt in front of the Grand Drexler estate. The headlights cut through the mist as he jumped out, his shoes slapping against the wet driveway. The house looked the same, massive, cold, impersonal. All glass and concrete, all money, no soul. He ran to the door and slammed his fist against it. Lucille, no response. His heart punched against his ribs. He banged again, louder. "Lucille, it's Robert. I got your message." Then, a faint sound, a whimper. He twisted the knob. Unlocked. He rushed in. Lucille was collapsed just feet from the door, legs curled, face pale, her hair stuck to her face in damp curls. Her nightgown was soaked. Her breathing came in shallow gasps. "Lucille, Jesus." Robert dropped to his knees beside her. Her eyes fluttered open, dazed. "You, Robert?" "I'm here." He brushed her sweat-drenched hair back. Her skin was burning. Her hands trembled as she gripped his shirt. "I tried to call everyone. No one came." His voice broke. "You don't have to explain. I've got you now." "I can't move," she whispered. I think she's coming." Robert didn't hesitate. He scooped her into his arms, one beneath her back, the other under her knees. She cried out in pain, her body contracting again, and he cursed under his breath. At the timing, at Miles, at every second she'd been left alone in this hell. "You're safe," he whispered. "You're not alone anymore." The interior of the Drexler mansion glared at him as he carried her. Through it, so pristine, so expensive, so completely void of warmth. He passed the untouched grand piano, the glass sculpture collection, the glossy staircase. All of it irrelevant. None of it had helped her. She buried her face into his chest as he stepped out into the rain, shielding her. With his body as he opened the car door and gently lowered her onto the seat. Robert slammed the door shut and ran around to the driver's side. As the car pulled away, he glanced at her. She was gripping her belly and whimpering through clenched teeth. He reached for her hand again. "You're going to make it," he said. "We're going to make it." The rain pelted the windshield as they sped toward the hospital. Inside the car, it was a storm of its own. Pain, memory, unspoken questions. Lucille groaned again, her body writhing in rhythm with each contraction. Robert kept one hand on the wheel, the other in hers. He didn't flinch when her nails dug into his skin. He welcomed it. He wanted to absorb some of the agony. She turned her head weakly toward him. "Miles said I was overreacting. Told me to let him finish his scotch tasting. He didn't come upstairs." Robert clenched his jaw. "Of course he didn't. I called everyone else. The housekeeper, the doctor, even Gwen. They failed you," he said coldly. "I thought I called my but I guess I called you." Robert glanced at her, eyes locked. "You think it was a mistake?" She hesitated. "No." The car was filled with silence for a beat. Then Lucille whispered, "I don't know what I expected, but not you." I didn't expect you either, he said. But I came anyway. Why? He looked ahead, jaw tightening. Because 2 years ago, I let you go without a fight, and I haven't slept through a single night since. Lucille's eyes welled with tears again, but she said nothing. He looked over at her once more, softer now. I don't care if you meant to call me or not. I'm here now, and I'm not leaving. They reached the emergency bay just as Lucille let out a long, guttural cry. A team of nurses rushed out with a wheelchair. Robert jumped out and opened the door, helping her down. She's in labor. It's moving fast, he said, voice firm. Lucille groaned. I don't think I can. Inside, as they rushed her through the sliding doors, Lucille fought the pain, breathing in short gasps. One nurse checked her vitals, while another prepped her for intake. Robert never let go of her. Contractions are under 4 minutes, the nurse said. We're taking her straight to labor and delivery. A third nurse asked, Are you the father? Lucille's eyes met his. She hesitated. Robert answered for her. Yes. The rain turned heavier, slapping against the hospital windows as Lucille was wheeled through the brightly lit corridor. Her body arched with another contraction, and she cried out, teeth clenched, fingers gripping the side of the stretcher. Robert stayed by her side, jogging to keep up, soaked to the bone, his shoes squeaking on the linoleum floor. I'm right here, he kept repeating. I'm not leaving. Her voice came out between panting breaths. Why are you here? He leaned down, brushing damp curls away from her forehead. Because you called me. I didn't mean to. His jaw tensed, but his voice stayed gentle. Maybe you didn't. Or maybe something inside you knew. Lucille looked away, blinking back tears. This wasn't supposed to happen. What part? This? She motioned to her belly. You, me, this night, any of it. But it did, Robert said softly. And now I'm here. Inside the labor room, nurses surrounded her, setting up IVs, checking vitals, moving fast but focused. The attending doctor appeared, a tall woman with tired eyes but steady hands. You're dilated to 9 centimeters, she said. Baby's coming fast. No time for an epidural. Lucille groaned again, face tightening. God, I can't do this alone. You're not alone, Robert said firmly. You have me. A nurse handed him a scrub cap and gloves. If you're staying, suit up. It's going to get intense. He didn't hesitate. Once dressed, he returned to her side, slipping his fingers through hers. Her breathing was erratic. Sweat rolled down her temples, but she still managed to speak. Miles didn't even look up when I told him the contractions were 5 minutes apart. Robert's voice dropped low. Don't waste your energy saying his name. Lucille's eyes flicked to him. You still hate him, don't you? Robert didn't blink. He spent his life taking things that never belonged to him. I wasn't a thing, she said softly. No, he replied. You were the one thing he could never keep. She turned her face to the side, ashamed. I married him anyway. You made a choice with the information you had at the time, Robert said. But choices can be corrected. Her lips trembled. And what if this baby? What if she's not his? Robert exhaled through his nose, then reached down, resting his hand gently over her stomach. What if she is mine? Lucille froze. I've thought about that possibility more than I want to admit, she whispered. His voice was calm. And how does that make you feel? Her eyes welled again. Terrified. He leaned down closer. You don't have to be. But it's not fair, she said. To anyone. Robert's grip on her hand tightened. Life doesn't hand out fairness, he said. But sometimes it hands you a second chance. Another contraction hit. Lucille arched her back and screamed, the room echoing with her agony. The monitor beeped rapidly. The nurses moved faster. The doctor nodded. We're close. One more push and she's here. Lucille's whole body trembled. I'm scared. Robert brought his forehead to hers. I've seen you fight harder battles than this, he whispered. You can do this. I don't feel strong. You are, he said. You just forgot. She screamed again. The doctor called out. One more. Right now. Lucille gritted her teeth and bore down with everything left inside her. And then, silence. A second later, a sharp cry pierced the room. High-pitched, powerful, alive. Lucille collapsed against the bed, chest heaving. Robert stood motionless, eyes wide. A nurse announced, It's a girl. Lucille didn't move. Then, Slowly, her head turned toward the sound. They placed the newborn on her chest, and for a moment nothing else existed. The tiny body wriggled, and her eyes opened, gray, just like his. Lucille gasped. "Emily." Robert's breath caught. "That's what you want to name her?" She nodded, weeping. He pressed his lips to her forehead. "She's perfect." Later, as nurses cleaned and swaddled the baby, Robert watched from the corner of the room. Lucille was quiet now, eyes fixed on the bundle in her arms. "I didn't know how to ask," she said, "but I always hoped, deep down, that she was yours." He stepped closer. "And what if she is?" Lucille looked up. "Then, everything changes." Robert smiled. "No, Lucille. Everything begins." The air in the room was warm, but tense. Lucille lay back against the hospital bed, her body drained, her arms cradling baby Emily against her chest. Robert sat nearby, still in scrubs, still processing. The only sound for a while was Emily's faint, rhythmic breathing. Lucille finally whispered, "Are you sure?" Robert didn't look away from the baby. The doctor said it with certainty. "But how?" Her voice cracked. "How could they know so quickly?" He turned to her now, voice steady. "When I arrived, they pulled up your emergency contact. You hadn't listed Miles. You listed me. They ran a basic blood compatibility screening. Emily's markers don't match Miles. They match mine." Lucille swallowed hard. "I wasn't thinking. I must have filled that form out months ago." "I don't care how," he said. "I care that she's ours." Lucille blinked, stunned. "Ours." A nurse walked in with paperwork and test results. She glanced at Lucille, then at Robert, then back again. "We confirmed everything," she said softly. "There's no question about paternity. Mr. Morgan, you're listed now as the legal next of kin for baby Emily." Robert nodded. "Thank you." As the nurse exited, Lucille looked down at the child in her arms. Emily stretched, then settled again, her fingers twitching. Her tiny mouth puckered into a perfect little pout. "She really is yours," Lucille whispered. "I see it now. I knew the moment I looked into her eyes." Lucille fought the tears rising again. "I didn't plan this. I thought it was Miles. I told myself it had to be." "You were scared," he said gently. "You were surviving." She turned her face toward him. "I buried that night in my memory, Robert. We never talked about it. And then I just moved on. You moved into a marriage with a man who treated you like an accessory." Robert said, the sharpness in his voice barely restrained. "Not a partner, not a mother, not a woman carrying life. I tried to make it work," she said, "but I never stopped thinking about you." He stepped closer. "And I never stopped waiting for you to come back." Emily made a soft noise, half cry, half hiccup, and Lucille adjusted her gently, rocking her in rhythm. "She's so small," she said. "She's real," he replied. Lucille looked up. "What do we do now?" Robert didn't hesitate. "We raise her. Together?" His eyes didn't waver. "I wouldn't let you do this any other way." Lucille sighed. "Miles won't go quietly. I don't expect him to. But I'm not afraid of him." "You should be," she said. "He doesn't lose well." Robert stepped even closer now. "Then he never should have played a game he was never meant to win." Lucille let the words sink in. They echoed something she had always known but refused to admit, that Miles had married her to win a rivalry, not to build a life. That what she had with Robert, brief as it had been, had always meant more than anything Miles ever offered. Later, when Emily was taken for a newborn screening, Lucille sat up slowly, her body sore but determined. Robert helped her sit upright, placing a pillow behind her back. "You don't have to do all of this now," he said. "I do," she replied. "I have to be clear, with myself, with you, and with him. You don't owe me anything." Lucille turned toward him. "That's not true. I owe you honesty. I owe you thanks. And I owe you the truth." Robert listened. "The night I married Miles, I thought I was closing a chapter. I thought I was choosing stability over confusion. But when I saw you at the gallery afterward, I couldn't even look you in the eye." "You didn't have to explain anything," Robert said. "You walked away. I hated it, but I understood. But now, here you are, in the middle of a delivery room, wearing hospital scrubs, holding a baby you didn't know was yours until an hour ago." Robert laughed softly. "It's not exactly how I pictured fatherhood. Is this too much?" she asked. "Too fast?" He shook his head. "Lucille, I've handled billion-dollar mergers, stock crashes, and courtroom disasters. None of it prepared me for this. And yet, I've never been more certain of anything in my life. Lucille stared at him, stunned. I love her already, he continued, and I never stopped loving you. Silence sat between them. Not the cold kind they were used to, but the sacred kind, the kind where only truth survives. Lucille nodded slowly, eyes misty again. I never wanted to be rescued, she said. I didn't come to rescue you, he replied. I came because I couldn't stay away. Just then, the nurse returned, wheeling Emily back in. The baby was swaddled tight, cheeks pink, eyes wide open. Robert stepped forward instinctively. The nurse smiled. She's alert, healthy, already strong. He reached for the child, pausing. May I? Lucille nodded. Robert took Emily into his arms. Her tiny body fit perfectly against his chest, like she belonged there. His heart thundered in his rib cage. She blinked slowly, settling into his warmth. I've got you now, he whispered. Lucille watched them both and finally smiled. You look like you've held her your whole life. Robert looked over. Maybe I have. Just never realized she was missing. The storm outside slowed, but inside Lucille's hospital room, everything was still spinning. Her body trembled from exertion. Her eyelids fluttered, heavy from exhaustion, but her heart beat steady now, no longer from fear, but from something else, relief. Robert stood beside her bed, holding their newborn daughter. The hospital gown clung to his frame, damp from sweat and rain, but he looked anchored, complete. Emily's eyes were closed now, peaceful. Her tiny hands curled at her chest, her breathing even and soft. Lucille turned her head toward him. You make it look easy. He looked down at the baby, then back at her. It's not, but it's worth it. A soft knock at the door interrupted them. The nurse peeked in with a clipboard. Lucille, just need you to confirm the name for the birth certificate. Lucille looked at Robert. Their eyes locked. Emily, she said clearly. Her name is Emily Morgan. The nurse smiled. Beautiful choice. Robert didn't say anything, but Lucille saw it, how his throat tightened, how his jaw flexed slightly. The name struck him somewhere deep. It wasn't just a name, it was a future. Later that evening, the monitors beeped rhythmically in the background. The storm had cleared. The hospital hallway outside grew quieter as visitors went home and staff rotated shifts. Lucille lay propped up with fresh sheets and pillows. Her hair had been gently cleaned and tied back, her cheeks still flushed from labor. But she looked different now, lighter. I don't know what I expected, she said, breaking the silence. Robert glanced over from the corner, where he rocked Emily in a small bassinet. From what? This. Her. You. Tonight. All of it. Did you expect to be alone? She nodded. Even when I wasn't alone, I was... Robert stood, walked over, and sat beside her on the edge of the bed. He leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees, watching Emily breathe. You're not anymore. Lucille studied him. Why didn't you ask questions? About the timeline, about the affair, about why I left? Because I already knew, he replied. We weren't just a mistake. You didn't leave because it meant nothing. You left because you were scared it meant everything. She blinked back tears. You said you loved me earlier, she whispered. Were you just overwhelmed, or did you mean it? Robert turned his head. His voice was calm. I've loved you since the night you left. I just stopped saying it out loud. Lucille inhaled, long and slow. He looked at her then. Really looked. Do you still love me? He asked. I don't think I ever stopped. The door creaked again. Another nurse entered, holding a tray of warm tea. I thought you both might need this. Lucille smiled, grateful. Thank you. Robert helped adjust her pillows while she sipped. She glanced down at Emily, now fast asleep. She has your eyes, she said. Robert chuckled. Let's hope she gets your strength. Lucille looked at him. She already has your heart. He turned to her, serious now. You could have died tonight, alone, in that house. She nodded slowly. I know. I can't stop thinking about that. Well, you didn't let it happen. No, he said, and I never will. Silence fell again, but it wasn't heavy. It was grounding. They didn't need to say everything. Some things were already known now, understood without explanation. Lucille reached out and placed her hand on Robert's. Her fingers fit there, as if they'd never stopped. In the middle of the night, Emily stirred. Lucille began to rise, but Robert was quicker. I've got her. She watched as he lifted their daughter, held her close, rocked her gently. You've done this before? She asked. He shook his head. No. But I've imagined it more times than I care to admit. She smiled, sleepy. I didn't know you wanted kids. I didn't want just any child, he replied. I wanted mine. He looked at her. I wanted this. By morning, Lucille was asleep, curled to one side of the bed, peaceful for the first time in months. Robert stood by the window with Emily in his arms, watching the city wake up, taxis passing, lights flicking on, lives beginning. He looked down at the baby again. I don't know what kind of world I'll build for you, he whispered, but I'll make damn sure it's one where you're never left wondering if you're loved. Emily shifted and let out a soft sigh, and Robert smiled. 3 days passed. Lucille's recovery had been steady. Her strength was returning, but the emotional wounds were still fresh. The days were quiet. Nurses came and went, and Robert remained at her side, holding Emily, pacing the room when she cried, smiling like a man who had finally arrived where he was always meant to be. But the silence didn't last. That morning, the door burst open with a bang. Miles Drexler stormed into the room in a tailored suit, his tie loosened, his hair uncombed, eyes bloodshot, breath laced with expensive liquor. Lucille tensed instantly, arms tightening around Emily. Robert stood, calm but alert. Miles's voice exploded through the room. What the hell is he doing here? Robert didn't move. Try a softer tone. There's a newborn in this room. Miles ignored the warning. Lucille, I've been calling you nonstop. I show up and he's playing house like he belongs here? Lucille didn't speak. Robert stepped forward. I was here because you weren't. She called you. You didn't answer. Miles scoffed. I was in a business meeting. She was in labor, Robert snapped. Alone, on the floor. And you were sipping scotch? Miles narrowed his eyes. You're just waiting for an opportunity to embarrass me. This isn't about you, Robert replied coldly. It's about a woman you failed and a child who's never even heard your voice. Miles turned toward Lucille. Is this some kind of punishment? You let him play father while I'm locked out? Lucille stood slowly from the bed, holding Emily close. His jaw twitched. I want a paternity test. Robert didn't blink. Already done. Miles blinked. What? The hospital ran a genetic marker screening, Lucille said, her voice steady. Emily isn't yours. That's not possible, Miles muttered. She was already pregnant when… She was mine, Robert interrupted, long before she became your wife. Miles turned crimson, his mouth working for a response but finding none. You used her as a trophy, Robert continued. A rivalry win. But I never stopped seeing her for who she truly is. Lucille's voice cut in, soft but firm. I begged you that night. I told you I was scared. You rolled your eyes, told me to stop being dramatic. I bled alone because you didn't think I was worth answering. Miles pointed at Robert, seething. You don't get to come in now like some savior. I didn't come to save her, Robert said. I came because she matters to me. She always did. Silence. Emily stirred in Lucille's arms. Robert stepped beside them and placed a hand on Lucille's back, grounding her. Miles looked at them both. The truth settled into his face, slow and bitter. The realization hit harder than anything Lucille could have said. He had lost, not just the woman, but the family he never tried to earn. He turned back toward the door. This isn't over. Robert didn't even glance his way. For you it is… The door shut behind Miles with a dull thud. Lucille stood still, heart racing. Emily made a soft noise and settled back to sleep. Robert turned to her gently. You okay? She nodded, but her voice trembled. I needed that. You didn't flinch. I always thought I needed his permission to walk away, she said. Turns out I just needed to stop waiting for an apology that would never come. Robert pulled her into him, careful not to disturb the baby. His arms wrapped around both of them. You never have to wait on anything again. Later, Lucille sat on the bed, watching Emily sleep in the bassinet. Robert brought over a glass of water and sat beside her. Do you regret it? He asked. She looked at him. Which part? Everything. The marriage, the silence, the fact that all of this came out the way it did. Lucille paused, her fingers tracing the curve of the baby's blanket. I regret letting someone else tell me what I was worth, she said. But I don't regret this. I don't regret her. and I don't regret you." He smiled, warm and real. "Good. Because I'm not going anywhere." She leaned her head on his shoulder. "Do you think she'll remember this?" "No," he said, "but we will." The hospital halls had quieted. It was nearly midnight when the last nurse left their room, dimming the lights and whispering a gentle goodnight. Emily was swaddled and fast asleep in the bassinet, her soft breaths barely audible beneath the hum of the monitors. Lucille sat upright in bed, her body still sore, but her mind no longer spinning. Across the room, Robert stood at the window, arms folded, his eyes scanning the night sky over the city. He didn't speak, didn't move, just stood there, silent but present. Lucille watched him. Everything about him looked familiar but different, like time had passed, but the foundation remained untouched. "I didn't mean for this to happen," she said softly. Robert turned. "I didn't want to hurt anyone, not even Miles." He walked over to her, pulled a chair beside the bed, and sat. "You didn't hurt anyone," he said gently. "You survived him." She swallowed. "I told myself I was being noble, that I chose stability over chaos, but what I really chose was fear." He nodded once, understanding. "And I don't want to live in fear anymore," she said. "Not as a woman, not as a mother." "You won't," he replied. "Not with me." Lucille looked down at her lap. "You're sure about this? About her? About us?" Robert leaned forward, his voice low and intimate. "I've never been more certain of anything." For a long moment they sat there, no words, no noise, just breath and closeness. Then she spoke again. "Do you remember the last night we spent together?" His eyes darkened slightly. "I remember every second." "It was never supposed to happen," she said. "But it did," he replied. "And it wasn't just a moment." "No," she whispered. "It was the only moment I felt like myself." He rose from the chair and sat on the edge of the bed, facing her. Lucille didn't flinch as his hand reached up to her jaw, thumb grazing her cheekbone. "You don't owe me anything," he said. "But I need you to know this. Loving you never stopped, even when you left, even when you married him, even when I hated myself for letting it all go." Lucille reached for his hand, their fingers laced. "I don't want to run anymore," she said. "I want to feel something real. I want to feel you." Robert's eyes searched hers for hesitation. He found none. He leaned in slowly, as if giving her time to pull away. She didn't. Their lips met, not urgent, but aching. A kiss built from years of distance, pain, longing. He cupped her face with both hands as she leaned into him, her breath catching as his tongue met hers in a slow, hungry dance. She tugged gently at his hospital scrubs, pulling him closer. He climbed into the bed beside her, careful not to disturb the IV tubing still attached to her hand. Lucille rolled to face him, sliding her fingers under the hem of his shirt. Her voice trembled. "Are you sure?" Robert kissed her again. "Yes. But only if you want this. I need to feel alive again." He undressed her slowly, reverently. There was no rush, no shame, no room for anything but truth. Her body bore the marks of labor, tenderness, tension, new softness. But to Robert, she was untouched in the only way that mattered. He kissed her shoulder, her clavicle, the line of her neck. When he reached the stretch marks along her hip, he paused and whispered, "These are proof that you fought for her." Lucille inhaled sharply as he pressed his lips to each one like a vow. She reached for him, pulling him down to meet her fully. When he entered her, she gasped, not from pain, but from the fullness, the welcome, the knowing. Their bodies moved in a rhythm that was never practiced, only remembered. He groaned her name into her skin. She moaned against his chest, clinging to his back as his pace deepened, intensified, but never lost its tenderness. It wasn't frantic. It was redemption. Afterward, they lay tangled beneath the thin hospital blanket, her head resting on his chest, his fingers tracing the curve of her spine. "I don't deserve this," she murmured. "You deserve everything," he replied. "Especially this." They fell into silence again, breathing in sync. Emily stirred once in the bassinet. Robert looked over. "She's going to ask one day how this happened," he said. Lucille smiled into his chest. "We'll tell her the truth." He ran his hand through her curls. That one wrong message saved 3 lives. She looked up at him, eyes shining. "I sent that text by mistake," she said. "No," Robert whispered. "You sent it exactly where it needed to go." The hospital room was dim, lit only by the soft glow of the hallway lights spilling in through the cracked door. Emily slept soundly in her bassinet, her tiny chest rising and falling in rhythm with the soft beeps of the machines nearby. Robert hadn't left the bed. Lucille lay beside him, bare beneath a thin sheet, her body curled toward his. She could still feel the weight of his hands on her, the way he had, touched her not like something fragile, but something worth revering. His hand moved slowly across her lower back, trailing along the curve of her waist. "Are you cold?" he asked. She shook her head. "No, I feel everything." He smiled faintly. "Good." Minutes passed, but the silence wasn't empty. It was laced with heat, charged with something that hadn't been fully spent. Lucille sat up slightly, pulling the sheet with her. She looked down at Robert, her fingers tracing the side of his face. He looked up at her like she was both miracle and memory. "You're still watching me, like I might vanish," she whispered. "Because I still can't believe you're real," he said. She leaned down, kissed his lips, soft at first, then deeper. When she pulled back, her voice trembled. "Touch me again, not because I'm hurting, but because I'm alive." Robert rose slowly, guiding her back down with a gentleness that sent a shiver through her. This time there was no rush. He started at her collarbone, pressing slow, open-mouthed kisses along the curve of her neck. His hands mapped her skin with intention, not just to arouse, but to memorize. He reached her hips and paused. His lips touched the soft skin marked by recent labor. Tears welled in her eyes. "You don't have to." "I want to," he said. "Every inch of you tells the story of a woman who survived. Let me honor it." He kissed the faint lines across her belly, the stretch of her thighs, the curve of her waist, one by one. Lucille closed her eyes and let him love her with reverence. She wasn't a woman being touched. She was being worshipped. His body moved over hers, careful and deliberate. When he finally entered her again, she gasped, not from the stretch, but from the slow burn of connection. They moved together like they'd been created for this reunion. Her fingers dug into his back. His lips found her jawline, her shoulder, her chest. The bed creaked softly beneath them, but neither cared. The world had disappeared. Robert whispered her name between strokes, his voice low and ragged. Lucille arched into him, her breath caught between pleasure and disbelief. "I've waited years to hold you like this," he groaned into her neck. "And I've waited years to be seen," she whispered back. He kissed her again, deeper this time, the kind of kiss that makes promises without words. Their pace built, gentle to firm, slow to needy, but never careless. He held her like he was afraid to lose her all over again. And when her body clenched around him, her cry was muffled in his shoulder. He followed seconds later, his hands bracing her hips, eyes shut tight as he came undone inside her. Afterward they stayed tangled, breathless, wordless, changed. Lucille rested her head against his chest, listening to the rhythm of his heartbeat. It steadied her more than any painkiller ever could. "I thought I'd never feel beautiful again," she said. Robert looked down at her. "You don't just look beautiful, you are—" She smiled softly. "You really believe that?" "I never say what I don't mean, especially to you." Lucille reached up, fingers brushing his cheek. "No one has ever looked at me the way you do, because no one else ever deserved to." They turned toward the bassinet. Emily stirred, but didn't wake. Robert rose quietly and walked over, checking the blanket around her. He adjusted the corner, then stood still, just watching. Lucille propped herself up, blanket around her chest. "You're already good at this." He looked back. "I had a good teacher. Me." He nodded. "Watching you fight through labor, watching you hold her, protect her. Love her before she was even here. That taught me everything." She smiled, tears building again. "Come back to bed," she whispered. He returned, climbing in beside her. They lay in silence again, hands intertwined, their bodies still slick with shared heat, but no longer desperate. This was a different kind of intimacy, one born from survival, from forgiveness, from rediscovery. Lucille turned to him. "What now?" "We take it slow," he said. "But we don't hide. You're not scared of the fallout?" "I'm not scared of anything that brings me closer to you." She kissed him again, longer this time. "Then let's rebuild." Outside the hospital, the city glowed under a quiet sky. But in room 812, the healing had already begun. The sun rose slow and gold across the city skyline, casting a soft glow through the wide hospital window. Lucille opened her eyes to the light, not jolted by pain this time, not dreading the day, but resting in a warmth that hadn't touched her skin in years. She was wrapped in quiet, the kind of quiet that didn't isolate, the kind that felt like peace. Robert was still asleep in the recliner, his arms slung over his chest, the hospital blanket kicked off his legs. His face, usually composed and sharp, now carried a softness she hadn't seen since their younger days. Lucille looked over at Emily, who stirred gently in the bassinet. Just watching her daughter breathe filled a space she didn't even know had been empty. This was hers now, not borrowed, not performative, real. Later that morning, a nurse came in with fresh linens and warm water for Lucille to clean up. Robert stirred awake at the soft knock, standing immediately to assist. "I've got her," he said. Lucille watched as he picked up their daughter with a tenderness that could never be imitated. He held Emily close, speaking softly to her. "Morning, little queen." Lucille's heart tugged, not from fear, from fullness. The nurse helped her to the bathroom, while Robert rocked the baby near the window. When Lucille returned, her robe tied and her cheeks washed, she looked new, still healing, but luminous. They spent the rest of the morning in slow motion. Robert sat on the bed beside her. They shared breakfast off a plastic tray, scrambled eggs, toast, and watery juice, but it tasted better than anything she'd had in months. Every bite, every smile, every glance, unspoken reassurance passed between them. Lucille caught him staring at her once as she adjusted her robe. "What?" she asked. Robert shrugged, smirking. "Just trying to remember how I ever let you walk away." She blushed, playful. "I didn't exactly give you a choice." "No," he said, "but now I'm choosing not to let it happen again." By noon, discharge paperwork was signed. The hospital staff prepped a wheelchair, and Robert double-checked the infant car seat. As they stepped out of the hospital together, Lucille in a flowing beige dress, Emily bundled in her arms, Robert beside them, it didn't feel rushed. It felt right, a new chapter, beginning with no fanfare. Just intention. The ride to Robert's penthouse was silent, but not stiff. Lucille leaned her head against the window, her fingers tracing Emily's blanket. Robert drove with one hand on the wheel, the other reaching across the console, holding her knee. That small touch meant more than words. When they arrived, the elevator doors opened into a high-rise home filled with light. The walls were warm ivory. Soft grays accented the furniture. Tall windows looked out over the city like a canvas of movement and promise. But the real masterpiece was the nursery. Painted in gentle pink and gold, it was a world of calm, a bassinet near the window, a rocking chair in the corner, a framed photo of a blossom in full bloom. Lucille stood in the doorway and covered her mouth. "You did all this?" she whispered. Robert stepped behind her. "Had it redesigned last month. I didn't know I'd need it so soon." Her eyes filled. "It's perfect." "No," he said, slipping his arms around her waist. "It's just ready for the two people who make it matter." That night, Lucille bathed, changed into one of Robert's t-shirts, and stood barefoot in the kitchen watching him prepare dinner. He chopped vegetables with sleeves rolled up, humming under his breath. She leaned on the counter, arms crossed. "You cook now?" "I survive," he said. "You deserve better than takeout every night." Lucille tilted her head, smiling. "You're trying too hard." "I'm not trying at all," he said. "This is just who I am when I'm not defending billion-dollar companies and avoiding my feelings." She chuckled. "Well, I like him. You should keep him around." Robert looked up, his voice quiet. "That's the plan." They ate by candlelight, not out of romance, but because the overhead lights felt too harsh for the softness between them. Emily lay asleep in a bassinet nearby. As they cleared the dishes, Lucille caught Robert's hand. "I didn't know love could be this quiet," she said. "This steady." Robert turned to her, his thumb brushing over her knuckles. "Love isn't supposed to be noise. It's supposed to be proof." Later, as they lay in bed, Emily in her nursery, the monitor on beside them, Lucille rested her head on Robert's chest. His heartbeat was slow. "Safe." She spoke into the silence. "You think we can really build something?" He didn't hesitate. "We already are." She looked up at him. "I want to believe I deserve this." "You do," he said. "You always did. But now, you finally believe it too." Lucille exhaled, not out of exhaustion, but relief. Her fingers traced the lines on his chest. She kissed his collarbone. "Do you think Emily will grow up happy?" "She'll grow up loved," he said. That's better. Outside the city moved on. Cars, conversations, chaos. But inside their new beginning, everything stood still. Lucille closed her eyes, curled into his arms. She no longer needed words to define this. She just needed what she already had. Silence, steady hands, shared dreams, and a love that no longer asked for permission to exist. Lucille adjusted the strap of her blouse and stared at the email on her screen. The subject line read, "Final draft, dissolution agreement." The sight of it didn't sting. Not anymore. Robert stood a few feet away, holding Emily in one arm while texting his legal team with the other. "Are you sure you're ready?" he asked, looking up. Lucille nodded. "I'm not just ready. I'm done waiting for closure. Now I'm delivering it." The next morning, Lucille arrived at the offices of Drexler and Holt, her hair pulled back, baby pink blouse tucked into sharp black slacks. No makeup, no jewelry, just precision. Confidence didn't need accessories. The receptionist looked up. "Mrs. Drexler." "Lucille Morgan," she corrected, offering a cool smile. "I'm here for the 10 a.m. meeting." The receptionist faltered, then buzzed legal. 2 minutes later, Miles walked into the lobby, wrinkled shirt, no tie, too much cologne. Lucille didn't stand. He approached cautiously, eyes darting from her face to her stomach, searching for weakness. But she didn't blink. "I didn't expect you to come in person," he muttered. She rose, slowly. "Because you've always expected me to avoid conflict." Miles cleared his throat. "You could have at least told me you were meeting with lawyers." "I did. You just weren't listening, like always." Inside the glass conference room, Lucille and Miles sat on opposite ends of the table. Their attorneys slid the papers across, page by page. Robert's legal rep, a woman named Ellis, handled everything with precision. There were no raised voices, no emotions weaponized, only facts, assets, custody terms, the paternity declaration, a clause waiving any rights Miles had over Emily, biologically, financially, or legally. Miles scanned that line 3 times, his hands tightening around the page. "You're serious about this?" he asked. Lucille answered evenly. "Dead serious. You're willing to walk away from the marriage like it meant nothing?" "It meant something," she said. "It taught me what I'll never tolerate again." Miles scoffed. "And run off into Robert Morgan's arms?" She leaned forward. "I didn't run. I crawled out of a house full of silence. And Robert didn't catch me. I called him, and he came." A pause. Then she slid the pen across the table. "I've already signed." Miles stared at it, jaw clenched. "You really think you'll be happier without me?" Lucille offered a look that wasn't cruel, but clear. "I already am." When the papers were signed and filed, Lucille stepped out into the hallway, phone in hand. She dialed. "Hey," she said. "It's done." On the other end, Robert exhaled. "How do you feel?" She smiled. "Free." Back at the penthouse, Lucille walked through the front door and dropped her purse on the entry table. Robert was on the couch, feeding Emily a bottle. She watched them quietly for a moment. His body leaned protectively around their daughter. His hand supporting the bottle, his eyes locked on hers like nothing else mattered. "How did it go?" he asked. She joined him on the couch and kissed his cheek. "It went the only way it could. I told Ellis to be aggressive if needed," he said. "She didn't need to be. I was..." He chuckled. "I never doubted that." Lucille leaned against him, resting her head on his shoulder. "No turning back now," she murmured. Robert looked down at her, his voice gentle. "Would you want to?" She smiled. "Not in 1,000 lifetimes." That evening, the 3 of them sat on the floor of the nursery, Emily on a plush blanket surrounded by soft toys, Lucille sipping tea, Robert sorting folded baby clothes into drawers. They didn't speak much. They didn't need to. There was no battle left to win. Just a life to live. Together. Lucille broke the silence. "I always thought divorce would make me feel like a failure." Robert looked up. "And I feel like I finally passed a test I never studied for." He smiled. "Welcome to peace." Just before midnight, after Emily was asleep, Lucille stood by the window in their bedroom, city lights glowing beyond the glass. Robert came up behind her, sliding his arms around her waist. She turned into him, resting her hands on his chest. "I don't want this to feel like a rebound," she said. "It's not," he replied. "This is the story that should have started years ago." Lucille tilted her head. "And now?" "Now we write the rest," he said. On our terms. She nodded and kissed him. Long, slow, like punctuation at the end of a sentence she was finally proud to write. The elevator doors opened to soft jazz playing in the background and the gentle hum of the city beyond the glass walls. The penthouse didn't just feel different. It was different. It wasn't designed to impress anyone. It breathed peace now. Lucille stepped inside with Emily asleep in her carrier and a fresh bouquet of lilies cradled in one arm. Robert was finishing a call on the balcony, his back turned, sleeves rolled up, phone tucked to his ear. I appreciate it, but make sure the contracts reflect full creative control on her end. No compromises. A pause. Yes, it's her vision, not mine. Lucille's eyes softened. This wasn't the man she used to know from headlines and boardrooms. This was the man who rearranged his life for a baby he didn't know existed 2 weeks ago, and a woman who once left without a word. She set the bouquet in a vase and unbuckled Emily. The baby stirred, whimpered, then settled into Lucille's arms with a sigh. Robert walked in, voice low. She okay? Lucille nodded. Just finished her nap. He leaned in and kissed Emily's forehead, then looked up at Lucille. And you? She smiled, still adjusting. But I'm getting there. Robert gestured toward the small desk in the corner. A folder sat on top of it. Your gallery proposal? The board approved the funding this morning. Lucille blinked. They what? He nodded. Full autonomy. It'll be in your name. Opening next spring. She stared at him, speechless. I didn't do you a favor, he added. You earned it long before I ever came back into your life. That night, Lucille stood on the rooftop terrace, barefoot, arms wrapped around herself as she looked out at the skyline. The wind moved gently, cool but not harsh. Robert stepped up behind her, wrapping a cashmere blanket around her shoulders. You disappeared on me once, he said softly. I was afraid, she replied. Of being too much, of not being enough, all at once. Robert leaned against the railing beside her. You are exactly right, as you are. She looked over. You're sure? He nodded. I don't build homes with doubt. Inside, Emily began to cry. Lucille moved instinctively, but Robert raised a hand. I've got her. He walked to the nursery with practiced ease. Lucille followed quietly and watched him from the doorway. He lifted Emily, bounced her gently on his chest, humming something low and soothing. Within minutes, she calmed. She's already attached to you, Lucille whispered. She's smart, he said. Lucille walked over, rested her head against his back. I never had this, she said. Not as a child, not as a wife, not even as a woman, really. Robert turned to face her. You do now, and it's yours, to keep. Over the next week, a rhythm settled into place. Morning started with soft music, the scent of cinnamon and coffee in the kitchen, and baby coos echoing through the penthouse. Afternoons were for building, Lucille meeting with curators, sketching exhibit layouts, and consulting with interior designers for the gallery space Robert had gifted her. Evenings were quiet, intentional, family dinners on the terrace, baths with lavender oil, story time with Emily, though she was far too young to understand the words, the warmth of their voices wrapped around her like a lullaby. One afternoon, Lucille walked into the nursery to find Robert asleep in the rocking chair, Emily curled against his chest. She stared at the sight. Her heart pressed against her ribs in a way it never had for miles. It wasn't just attraction, it was safety, sanctuary. She leaned against the doorframe and whispered, You two look perfect together. Robert stirred, opened his eyes with a lazy grin. We're just getting started. That night, after Emily was asleep, Lucille and Robert lay in bed, bodies tangled, minds quiet. She placed her palm over his heart. I didn't think I'd ever want love again, she confessed. He turned to her. I didn't think I'd find peace in a place this loud. This loud? He smiled. Your laugh, her cry, my heartbeat every time you walk into a room. All loud, all worth hearing. Lucille rolled closer. I could get used to this. No, he whispered. Don't get used to it. Let it keep surprising you. A few days later, she stood before the framed final draft of the gallery plans. Signed, Lucille Morgan, founder and creative director. The signature still surprised her, not because it felt foreign, but because it finally felt true. Robert walked up behind her, kissed the top of her head. She's going to grow up knowing her mother built something powerful. Lucille turned to him, glowing. She'll grow up knowing her mother refused to settle for anything less than real. It had been almost a month since Lucille signed the divorce papers. A month of healing. A month of rediscovering the version of herself she had buried under compromise and silence. But ghosts have a habit of knocking, and that knock came just past noon. Lucille was in the gallery space, going over lighting placement with the contractor when her phone vibrated. A message popped up. "Miles Drexler, I need to see you. Today. No lawyers, no drama." She stared at it for a full minute before locking the screen. She didn't respond. Not right away. Not out of fear. Out of clarity. She no longer owed him access to her time. That evening, she brought it up while feeding Emily her bottle. Robert sat on the floor beside her, stretching his back after a long day of meetings. He texted. Lucille said. Robert didn't need to ask who. He wants to talk. Alone. Robert wiped his hands with a cloth. Calm. "You don't have to go." "I know," she said. "But you want to." "I want to end this in person. For me." Robert nodded. "Then go. But go as you. Not as who he trained you to be." Lucille looked over, a slow breath leaving her chest. "That version of me doesn't exist anymore." The next day, Lucille arrived at the cafe where Miles had requested they meet. It was one of those high-end spots, neutral tones, overpriced lattes, and clientele who watched each other more than they talked. He was already there, sunglasses on, wristwatch out. He stood when she arrived. "Lucille." She didn't shake his hand. She just sat. Miles eased back into his seat, eyes scanning her face. "You look different." She arched an eyebrow. "Healthier, you mean?" He offered a humorless laugh. "You've got jokes now." "No," she said plainly. "Just boundaries." The waiter came, took orders, disappeared. Miles cleared his throat. "I came to say I'm not proud of how I handled things. I didn't expect you to leave." "You didn't expect me to survive without you," she replied. "There's a difference." He blinked. She continued. "You didn't want a wife. You wanted an extension of your image. And when I stopped fitting that, you ignored me. Even when I was in labor. That night." He shook his head. "I didn't think it was real. And now it is," she said. "And her name is Emily." Miles shifted uncomfortably. "So that's it? You and Robert are just a family now." "No," Lucille said, calm but firm. "We're not just anything. We're building a life from the truth, something you never made space for." Miles leaned forward. "You think he's better than me?" She didn't answer right away. She sipped her drink. Then, placing it down slowly, she said, "He didn't have to be better. He just had to show up." Silence hung between them. Then she leaned in slightly. "This meeting isn't about Emily. She's not your child. And it's not about Robert. This is about you needing closure." Miles looked away. "You got it," she said. "Now let's call this what it is, a full stop." She stood, gathering her purse. He looked up, voice quiet. "So, this is really goodbye?" Lucille paused, then turned to him with a gentleness he didn't deserve, but one she needed for herself. "Yes, Miles, this is goodbye. And no, I'm not angry anymore. I'm just free." Back at the penthouse, Lucille opened the door to find Robert holding Emily against his chest, humming as he paced. He looked up. "How'd it go?" Lucille kicked off her heels, stepped forward, and melted into his arms. No fireworks, just the right words, finally spoken. He looked at her, brushing her hair back. "You okay?" She smiled. "I didn't break. I didn't even flinch." "You walked out of fire with grace," he said. Lucille kissed him softly. "Thank you. For not needing to fix me. Just for being here while I fixed myself." That night, Lucille sat in the nursery, rocking Emily. She held her daughter close, whispering promises. "You'll never have to question what love looks like. You'll see it in how he holds you, in how I fight for you, in the way this home will always feel. Open, honest, yours." Robert stood by the door, watching mother and daughter wrapped in their own quiet world. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. Lucille looked up at him and smiled. The morning began with stillness. Sunlight spilled through the penthouse windows, and Lucille sat at the dining table, feeding Emily with one hand while flipping through gallery blueprints with the other. Robert leaned against the counter sipping coffee, watching both girls in his life. He didn't say it aloud, but every morning felt like a blessing he didn't want to take for granted. Until Lucille winced. Subtly at first, just a twitch. She adjusted in her seat, shook it off. Robert noticed. "Everything okay?" "Yeah," she murmured. "Just a cramp, nothing big." But by noon, she was sweating through her shirt. By 2, her hands were shaking. And by 4, she was on the bathroom floor, pale, breath shallow, clutching her abdomen while Robert called for help. The ambulance came fast. Robert held Emily against his chest, trying to stay calm, but the sight of Lucille being loaded into a stretcher gutted him. "She just had a baby," he told the paramedic. "It could be postpartum. It could be anything." "We'll stabilize her on the way," the paramedic replied. "Stay close. I'm not leaving her." At the hospital, time bled together. Tests, fluids, monitors. Lucille faded in and out, her skin cold, lips dry. Robert held her hand through it all, whispering her name even when she couldn't answer. "I'm here, baby. Stay with me." A young doctor entered the waiting area, clipboard in hand. "Mr. Morgan?" Robert stood. "We're treating a postpartum hemorrhage," the doctor explained. "Her body retained tissue from delivery. It's caused an infection. We need to act quickly." "Is she stable?" "She's fighting," the doctor said, "but she needs surgery." Robert's breath hitched. "She'll be okay," the doctor added. "She got here in time, because someone cared enough to bring her fast." Robert nodded. "Do whatever it takes." The hours crawled. Emily slept in his arms, unaware of the storm around her. Robert paced, until the nurse came out again. "She's in recovery. You can see her now." Lucille was pale, but breathing steadily. Her eyes fluttered open as Robert stepped into the room. He didn't speak. He simply walked to the bed and took her hand, lifting it to his lips. "I thought I lost you," he whispered. "You didn't," she rasped. "You saved me. I'll do it again tomorrow. And the day after that." She let out a soft laugh, then winced. "Okay, maybe don't make me laugh." He pulled a chair close and sat beside her. "You scared me. I scared me too." They were quiet for a long moment. Then Lucille whispered, "What if I didn't make it?" Robert's jaw clenched. "I don't answer that question, because you did. And you're here, with me, with her." She closed her eyes. "I never knew love could make someone stay through the ugly parts." He leaned forward, forehead to hers. "I didn't stay despite the pain. I stayed because I chose the whole of you, always." Over the next few days, Lucille's strength returned slowly. Robert never left. He answered every phone call. He coordinated Emily's care. He made sure Lucille ate. And every night, he pulled the hospital cot next to her bed and held her hand while she slept. One evening, she whispered in the dark, "I've never felt so seen." "You're more than seen," he replied. "You're loved, completely. My wonderful family. I know you're feeling the depth of this story right now, and that's why I want you to pause for a moment and show me you're still here. Drop a comment below with the words, 'I'm with you, Dr. Phillips,' so I can feel your heartbeat in this journey. Don't just watch in silence. Share your thoughts, like this video if it resonates with you, and subscribe so you never miss another story. Your support keeps this channel alive and spreads these powerful messages of love and healing to others who need them too." On the morning of discharge, Lucille stood on shaky legs, leaning against Robert's arm. "I feel like I've been reborn," she said. He looked at her, eyes soft. "You were..." She smiled. "Then you were the fire I passed through." He kissed her temple. "And I'd burn for you again." Back at the penthouse, Robert helped her into bed, laid Emily beside her, and knelt on the floor. "Rest," he said. "You've done more than enough." Lucille looked down at him, brushing his cheek. "No, Robert, we did." 2 weeks passed. The worst was behind them. Lucille's color had returned. Her laugh was real again, and the circles under her eyes no longer carried the weight of exhaustion, but of love, a kind that made sleep feel like a luxury, not a necessity. The days had rhythm now. Not perfect, not predictable, but human. At 3:07 a.m., Emily screamed with the force of a siren. Lucille jolted awake, reaching for the bassinet, but Robert was faster. He sat up, groaned slightly, and padded barefoot across the room with hair sticking up in every direction. "I've got her," he muttered. Lucille leaned on her elbow, amused. "You sure?" He scooped Emily up, holding her like a football. "Positive. Daddy's shift." Lucille chuckled. "She just ate 2 hours ago. She can't be hungry again." Robert sniffed the air. "Then we've got a different emergency." He disappeared into the nursery, humming low and off-key. Lucille stayed in bed, eyes heavy but smiling. She heard the wipes, the running tap, a soft one-sided conversation. "You really planned this, huh? Woke us up just to see who loves you more. We both do. Now hush, Commander Sassy Pants." She closed her eyes. This was her peace. By sunrise, Lucille walked into the kitchen in Robert's t-shirt and a silk robe. The smell of warm oats and cinnamon greeted her. Robert stood over the stove, bouncing Emily in a sling strapped across his chest. Lucille raised an eyebrow. "Is that new?" He turned proudly. "Hands-free parenting, patent pending." She laughed. "I love this version of you." He leaned over and kissed her forehead. "I love every version of you." They sat down to eat, baby between them, breakfast steaming, jazz playing softly in the background. "I keep waiting for it to fall apart," Lucille admitted. "For what to?" "This. Us. The calm." Robert reached across the table, covering her hand with his. "It won't fall apart. We built this on truth, not illusions." She nodded slowly. "I still have moments when I wake up thinking it was all a dream. Then let's keep waking up together until it feels real." Later that afternoon, Lucille sat with Emily on the couch, bouncing her gently. The baby's eyes danced around the room, then locked onto her mother's face. And then it happened. A smile. Small, toothless, perfect. Lucille gasped. "Robert." He rushed in, drying his hands with a towel. She just smiled. "I swear it." Robert knelt beside them. "You saw it?" "Do it again, baby girl," Lucille cooed. "Show Daddy." Emily blinked and grinned again. Lucille laughed, tears welling. "She smiled at me." Robert leaned in close. "She knows who her person is." Lucille glanced over. "We're her people." He kissed the back of her hand. "We are." That night, Lucille walked into the nursery with a baby monitor in one hand and a glass of water in the other. Robert was already there, rocking Emily slowly. "She's fighting sleep," he said. "She gets it from me." "Stubborn?" Lucille smiled. "Determined." Robert stood and handed her the baby. Lucille nestled her close and began humming. Soft, slow, soothing. Emily's eyes fluttered. Closed. Gone. Robert exhaled. "How do you do that?" Lucille looked up. "Mothers just know." When they crawled into bed later, Robert pulled Lucille close. "I know we joked about being tired for the next 18 years, he murmured, "but I wouldn't trade this for anything." She nestled into him. "Neither would I." He kissed her hair. "You're doing amazing." "You too." He chuckled. "I've changed more diapers in 2 weeks than I've signed contracts in 2 months. "And you've signed a lot of contracts," she said, grinning. "But none this permanent," he replied. Lucille stilled. Soft, silent. She kissed his jaw. "I'd sign my name beside yours 100 times over." The baby monitor crackled softly on the nightstand. They held hands under the blanket. No need to speak. The silence now wasn't heavy. It was earned. The awning above the door read, "Lucille Morgan Fine Arts." No tagline, no embellishments. Just her name, etched in brass against matte black glass. Simple, unapologetic. The inside was flooded with morning light, pouring through the floor, to ceiling windows, illuminating white walls and honey-toned floors. Canvases lined the walls, hers and the artists she believed in. This wasn't just a gallery, it was her resurrection. Lucille stood near the center, wearing a tailored cream jumpsuit and low heels. Her curls were pulled into a loose bun, a soft gold necklace resting just above her collarbone. She looked like herself, fully formed, fully seen. Robert stood at her side, arms crossed, watching her more than the art. "You did this," he said. Lucille shook her head. "We did." He reached for her hand. "You always had the vision. I just moved the walls." She smiled, eyes watering slightly. "It's everything I never let myself want." The opening was still a week away, but today was a private preview. Just for them. Just for her. Robert had arranged everything. Flowers by the door, soft music floating from hidden speakers, and the final surprise she hadn't yet noticed. "Walk with me," he said. They strolled the gallery slowly, pausing at key pieces. One was a photograph Lucille had taken in a Ghanaian village. Another was a charcoal portrait of a woman holding a child, eyes rimmed with fire and faith. Then they reached the end. A velvet curtain covered the back wall. Robert stopped. Lucille looked at him, Suspicious. What is this? He didn't answer. Just pulled the cord. The curtain dropped. Behind it was a massive painting, one she hadn't seen in over 2 years. Her own. The one she'd sold anonymously when she left everything behind. The one called Reclamation. A faceless woman walking barefoot through a burning field, holding a child on her hip, flames behind her, light ahead. Lucille gasped. Her hand flew to her chest. Robert whispered, "I tracked it down. Bought it back from a private collector. She didn't want to let it go." Lucille turned to him, stunned. "I told her it belonged to the woman who painted it in survival, and that now she was living in restoration." Tears spilled. She covered her mouth, overwhelmed. Robert took her into his arms. "I don't want to build towers with my name on them anymore," he said. "I want to build legacies with yours." Lucille held him tighter. "You already are." They sat on the bench beneath the painting, hands clasped. "I almost didn't sign that piece," she confessed. "I was afraid someone would recognize me, that Miles would find out I was still creating." Robert kissed her knuckles. "Let him watch. You're not hiding anymore." Later that evening, after the lights dimmed and the staff left, Lucille and Robert returned to the gallery alone. He unlocked the doors, carried a bottle of champagne in one hand, and placed a soft blanket on the floor beneath the largest skylight. Lucille stepped out of her heels and joined him barefoot. They toasted to truth, to second chances, to beginnings that feel like endings, but aren't. Their lips met softly at first, but tonight wasn't about caution. It was about reverence, about undressing someone not just out of want, but out of knowing. Robert lifted her gently, laying her back on the blanket. Lucille's breath caught as he removed the zipper from her jumpsuit, kissing the exposed skin inch by inch. When she reached for him, he groaned. "You still undo me," he whispered. "And you still rebuild me," she replied. They made love in the heart of her gallery, beneath the brushstrokes of her own survival, under stars and skylight. Not rushed, not desperate, just present. Afterward, she lay on his chest, watching the moonlight pool across the canvas of her painting. "Do you know what this moment means?" she whispered. Robert looked down. "Tell me." "It means I don't have to be anyone else. Not anymore." He kissed her hair. "And I get to love you in full light now." They stayed there until the night folded into dawn. The gallery didn't feel like a space anymore. It felt like a name, a promise, a place where art, healing, and love would always belong. The gallery opening arrived, 7 weeks after Emily's birth, 4 since the divorce was finalized, and nearly 1 year to the day since Lucille had quietly vanished from public life. Tonight wasn't just an exhibition. It was a return. Photographers clustered outside the venue, flashes sparking like fireworks as guests. Informal wear arrived, mingling on the red carpet lined with deep blue velvet rope. The press had been buzzing for days. Lucille Morgan reemerges as visionary curator. From scandal to spotlight, the woman behind the canvas. Robert Morgan funds X's new beginning, but it's her name on the walls. Inside, the gallery buzzed. Fashion critics, art bloggers, collectors, curators from out of state. But all eyes shifted when the main doors opened, revealing Lucille on Robert's arm. She wore a white satin gown with a dramatic open back, her curls styled in a loose updo, skin glowing, eyes focused. Not a single accessory, not even earrings. She didn't need them. Robert stood tall beside her in a charcoal gray suit, one hand lightly resting at the small of her back, the other free to shake hands, nod politely, and protect the space around her like a shield. But he never stood in front of her. Lucille walked first. The crowd parted. Whispers rippled like wind. "Is that her? She looks incredible. That's Robert Morgan with her, right? She owns this place now?" Yes, she did. Cameras clicked. Reporters approached. But Lucille kept walking until she reached the microphone at the center of the room. The wall behind her held a new piece, her most recent work, titled Becoming, a self-portrait, raw, honest, nothing polished, nothing fake, just a woman emerging from her own shadows. Lucille faced the room, cleared her throat, and spoke. "I want to thank everyone for being here tonight, not because I need validation, but because this space was never meant to be about me." A pause. "But for years I stopped creating because I thought I had to shrink to survive. I stopped painting, stopped dreaming, stopped showing up for myself." She glanced at Robert. then back to the crowd, until one night when I sent a message that was never meant to reach the man who received it. And yet, it reached exactly who it was supposed to. Silence filled the space. No performance, just truth. Lucille continued, voice steady. This gallery isn't about art that pleases. It's about art that remembers, the kind that speaks from brokenness, rises through grief, and lands in power. A soft wave of applause followed. She stepped back. Robert handed her a glass of sparkling cider. They touched foreheads briefly, sharing the kind of smile that didn't need an audience, but had one anyway. Later, as they walked through the exhibits, Lucille paused at a portrait by a Ghanaian teenage artist she discovered through a nonprofit. "This is why we do it," she whispered. Robert nodded. "Exactly this." A guest approached, a high-profile curator from Chicago. "Ms. Morgan," the woman said, "your work speaks in a way most galleries fail to let happen." Lucille offered a warm smile. "Thank you. That's all I ever wanted." The curator glanced at Robert, then back at Lucille. "Is it hard, being back in public after everything?" Lucille looked around, at the spotlight, the scrutiny, the weight of her name. Then she turned back. "It's not hard," she said. "It's mine." When the event finally wound down, they left through the front doors, hand in hand, not dodging cameras. Just walking. Together. Someone called out, "Ms. Morgan, one photo." Lucille stopped. She turned toward the camera, pulled Robert closer, and smiled. Not for the press, for herself, because this time she wasn't hiding behind a husband's name. She wasn't the whispered scandal. She wasn't the woman left behind. She was the artist, the mother, the survivor, the woman who rewrote her own ending. In the car, Robert held her hand in the dark. "You did it," he said. "No," Lucille replied, eyes fixed on the skyline. "We did." The penthouse no longer echoed with silence. It was now filled with music, baby giggles, kitchen noises, the sound of footsteps without fear. And every morning, sunlight spilled across the hardwood floor like a promise. Lucille sat cross-legged on the living room rug, cradling Emily as the baby's tiny fingers curled around one of her curls. "You're obsessed with my hair," she laughed softly. Emily babbled back in baby speak, grinning toothlessly. Robert entered wearing sweats and carrying 2 mugs, one for her, just the way she liked it. Almond milk, cinnamon, a pinch of nutmeg. "Good morning, my girls." Lucille tilted her head to accept a kiss. "We were just talking about fashion. She already has opinions? She's your daughter." Of course. Breakfasts were slow. Robert cooked. Lucille plated. Emily flung oatmeal with zero remorse. The kitchen had never been about perfection. It was about togetherness. Sometimes they sat on the balcony with bare feet. Other times, they spread a blanket in the living room, like a picnic. There were no assistants, no nannies, no stylists, just them. At night, when Emily drifted off in her crib with a plush giraffe in one arm, Lucille and Robert would stand in the doorway watching her breathe. "She looks just like you when she sleeps," he whispered. Lucille smiled. "And you when she frowns." He kissed her temple. Poor thing. She leaned into him. Blessed thing. Their home was now layered in comfort. Artwork on the walls. A mobile above Emily's crib made from reclaimed paper and gold thread. A wine rack Robert never touched but kept stocked for guests. A nursery rocking chair that once belonged to Lucille's grandmother, now freshly upholstered in burnt orange velvet. These weren't trophies. They were roots. One Saturday they visited the park. Lucille wore a sun hat. Robert pushed the stroller. Emily squealed as ducks waddled by. An older woman on the bench next to them leaned in and said, "Beautiful family." Lucille didn't correct her. She didn't say we're not married. She didn't say this is my second chance. She just smiled and said, "Thank you," because it was true. They were a family. That night, Lucille stood in front of the mirror, watching herself in a silk robe. Her body bore proof of survival. Stretch marks, new curves, softness in places once tense. But instead of critiquing, she admired. Robert stepped behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist. "You're even more stunning now," he said, voice thick. She turned, laying her hands on his chest. "Even when I don't wear lashes, especially then, they made love like they were writing poetry in motion. No fear, no rush, no pretending." After, they lay tangled in each other, limbs overlapping like ivy on brick. Lucille whispered, "Do you ever miss the boardrooms?" Robert traced circles on her thigh. "Not once." "You don't miss that version of yourself?" "I was never him." "Not really." She rested her head on his chest. "I like this version," she said. He kissed her hair. "Me too." Later that week, they walked through the farmer's market. Lucille picked up flowers, ranunculus, her favorite. Emily held a cucumber like it was treasure. Robert bartered with a vendor over eggs. It was mundane. It was magical. Because it was theirs. They didn't need headlines. They didn't need drama. They needed slow Sundays, shared playlists, and the peace that came from waking up next to someone who chose you, not for optics, not for legacy, but for love. Lucille had once believed she had to survive in silence. Now she was thriving in volume. And the city, once a witness to her heartbreak, was now the canvas to her healing. That evening, as golden hour painted the skyline outside their windows, Lucille posted a photo on her art gallery's page. It was a candid. Robert on the couch, Emily on his lap, a sketchpad on the table with Lucille's charcoal fingerprints still fresh. The caption read, "Home isn't a place. It's who holds your hand after the storms. Morgan House and Gallery of Love." And in that moment, surrounded by love, art, and the city that once tried to swallow her name, Lucille Morgan didn't just feel seen. She felt whole. The rain fell in whispers that night. Outside the penthouse windows, the city pulsed with its usual brilliance. Cars crawling like ants, high-rises gleaming like crowns. But inside, time slowed. Emily had just fallen asleep after her third lullaby. Lucille tiptoed from the nursery, barefoot, hoodie draped over her silk nightgown. She found Robert in the kitchen, sleeves rolled up, washing the baby bottles without being asked. She leaned against the doorframe. "You never let them soak," she said softly. He looked up, smirking. "You married a man who fears dried formula more than Wall Street." She smiled. "We're not married." He wiped his hands slowly. "Not yet." Lucille's heart skipped. Robert walked toward her with a quiet intensity. There was no box in his hand, no rose petals, no music swelling in the background, just the hum of the refrigerator and the breath between them. He stopped in front of her, looked her in the eyes, and spoke, not with fanfare, but with a kind of sincerity that silenced every past doubt. "Lucille, I've built empires, broken them, rebuilt them again. But nothing in my life has made sense the way you do." She opened her mouth, but he gently lifted a finger. "Please, let me finish this." She nodded, eyes already glassy. "I don't want a headline proposal. I don't want a destination wedding or a gala that makes us feel like guests at our own vows. I just want you, always, even when we're old. Even when you forget where you left your glasses, and I forget why I walked into a room." Lucille laughed through a tear. He stepped closer, voice lower. "You gave me something I didn't think I deserved again. Family, grace, a daughter who thinks I'm her jungle gym, and a love that taught me how to breathe for real." He reached into his hoodie pocket, pulled out a velvet pouch, opened it. Inside wasn't the world's biggest ring. It wasn't designed to dazzle the press. It was elegant. One single diamond, oval cut, set in brushed gold. It was hers. He dropped to one knee, right there on the kitchen tiles. "I love you, Lucille Morgan. Not the version the media talked about, not the woman they once whispered about. You, the one who doesn't flinch when I lose my patience, the one who kisses Emily's knees when she falls, the one who stayed, after everything." Her hand flew to her mouth. He looked up, eyes full. "Will you marry me? Not for redemption, not for appearance, but because this time, we both know what love is." Lucille fell to her knees too. She couldn't stand above that moment. She needed to be level with him, soul to soul. She threw her arms around him, breath catching in her throat. "Yes," she whispered, voice breaking. "Yes, yes, God, yes." He wrapped her up, held her like a man anchoring his world in one final vow. They sat on the floor, forehead to forehead, laughter tumbling between kisses. Later, they curled up on the couch in the quiet glow of the kitchen. Light, hands entwined, the ring glinting in a way that felt holy. "Do you want a wedding?" Robert asked. Lucille looked down at their joined hands. "I want a marriage." He smiled. "We'll make it ours. No noise. Just us." She rested her head on his shoulder. "You already gave me the best ceremony tonight. You washed bottles." He laughed. You'll put that in the vows, won't you? Page 1. The next morning, Lucille woke before sunrise. Emily slept peacefully in her crib. She walked to the balcony, pulled the curtain aside and stood there, watching the city yawn to life beneath the pink wash of dawn. The ring caught the first ray of sun, but it wasn't what shimmered most. It was her, the woman who had risen from silence, scandal, and shame, and found home in a whisper of forever. It was a rainy afternoon when the phone rang. Lucille was folding Emily's clothes, tiny onesies, pastel socks, a knit hat embroidered with a bumblebee. The nursery smelled of lavender and fabric softener. Rain tapped against the glass like a familiar friend. She almost didn't hear it. The phone buzzed again, and when she picked it up, the caller ID flashed. Dr. K. Bryant. Her breath caught. She hadn't spoken to the doctor since Emily's birth. Lucille? The voice on the other end said, "Yes, I'm here." There was a pause. "I wanted to call you personally," the doctor continued. "I just reviewed something during our final rounds of checkups that I'd been meaning to share, something from the night you went into labor. It got buried in the chaos, and I believe it's time." Lucille straightened. She closed the door gently behind her and sat at the edge of the bed. "Okay, you remember when I ran that emergency test after your collapse?" Lucille nodded, swallowing hard. "Well, turns out the initial diagnosis we had wasn't quite accurate. Your scan showed signs of a cardiac anomaly, likely genetic but minor. It's something that should be monitored, but it wasn't the reason you collapsed. In fact, your body was under extreme emotional distress." Lucille blinked. "So it was heartbreak." The doctor's voice softened. "Yes, and that kind of grief can do real damage. But here's the thing, Lucille, your recovery, it's miraculous. And more than that, the test results from this morning?" She hesitated. "What about them?" "Your system, your heart, it's healing beautifully. No signs of scar tissue, no indicators of long-term complications." Lucille sat in silence. "But that's not all," the doctor added. "Your file. Do you remember the very first record we had from you, before Emily? The intake form from the ER?" Lucille exhaled. "Barely. You listed your emergency contact as Robert Morgan." Lucille gasped. "But I hadn't even—" "I know," the doctor said gently. "You had just sent that text, the one to the wrong number." Lucille's heart slammed into her ribs. That night, the text meant for a rideshare service, sent to a number 1 digit off. The message read, "I'm at the entrance. Please don't leave me." And the man who received it, not a stranger, not a mistake. Robert. Lucille clutched the edge of the bedsheet. "That text saved your life," the doctor said. "If he hadn't shown up, if he hadn't insisted, you would have gone home that night, alone, and who knows what would have happened." Lucille closed her eyes. The tears came quietly, not the loud, broken sobs of betrayal. These were gentle, relieved, whole. After hanging up, Lucille sat with her phone in her palm, staring at the screen. The memory flooded back. That stormy night, the contractions, the pain, the fear, and the wrong number. That had led to everything right. Robert returned home later that evening, umbrella in one hand, dinner in the other. He stopped when he saw her sitting in the middle of the living room floor, eyes red, baby clothes around her like flower petals. He knelt beside her. "What happened?" She looked at him, voice a whisper. "You remember the night I texted you by mistake?" He chuckled, vividly. "You called me your rideshare salvation." She smiled through a tear. "That text saved my life. Literally." He blinked. She said, "If you hadn't shown up—" Robert touched her cheek. "I would have found you anyway." Lucille rested her forehead against his. "I'm just grateful." He pulled her into his arms. "I am too. Every day." That night, they didn't go out. No candlelit dinners. No fancy events. They sat on the couch, Emily between them, watching old cartoons while a pot of tea steamed beside them. Lucille picked up her phone, scrolled through her old texts, found it, the message that started it all. She stared at it, then whispered, "Thank you." Robert glanced over. "Who are you thanking?" She smiled. "The version of me who didn't give up." As the night deepened and the city lights danced on the windows, Lucille drafted a caption for a post. A picture of their hands, hers, his, and Emily's tiny fingers curled over both. The text read, I once texted the wrong number during the worst moment of my life, and it led me to the man who would become my safe place. Some mistakes are actually miracles. Hashtag second chances Morgan family, she hit publish. Closed her phone and exhaled. Outside, the rain had stopped. But inside, love poured quietly, steadily, fully, just as it always should have. My beautiful family, before we close today's story, I want to remind you that your voice truly matters here. If this story touched your heart, let me feel your presence. Drop a comment below with your thoughts, your feelings, or even just the words "I am with you, Dr. Phillips." Every like, share, and subscription doesn't just support the channel, it spreads love, hope, and strength to someone who might need it right now. Stay connected, because every twilight has its light, and together we keep shining. Until next time, keep believing in love and its healing power.